Tavis of Chamisha B'Tavis, especially considering the Dida Notzach that we experienced personally. Have you ever seen Jews love each other so much in your life? It's the most remarkable. It's such an amazing experience. It's amazing. Pashat amazing. You know a younger man, he's a photographer. So Thursday night he was at a wedding. Not a Lubavitcher wedding. And a Lubavitcher younger man who was at the wedding said, I need to introduce you to somebody. And introduces him to a Litvish Rosh Yeshiva, a Mesnagid, who's a Talmud of Pliny ben Pliny from Bnei Brak, who in Yeshiva on Thursday gave a shiur. And he asked the question that really everybody is trying to figure out. You know, there's a lot of Frum Jews in jail. I don't know if you know this. They don't have the rights to the prisons, but there's a percentage of Frum Yidden in jail. Most Frum Yidden who leave jail, not only nobody makes a simcha out of it, they don't even want that anybody should notice that they were in jail, that they went. It's embarrassing. And here there is a fellow who sat in jail for 8 years plus in a maximum security prison, and there's such an outpouring of joy and love. And the question is, what makes this different? It's a great question. There's a lot of answers. There's many answers to this question. And by the way, I never do this, but I gave a class in Beisrivka about this, and I sent it out on my WhatsApp, and it's made the rounds. I think it's good. But I made a number of points about this case that explain why Yidden are reacting the way they're reacting. So this Rosh Yeshiva said, you know why everyone is so excited for Rubashkin? This is what Amos Nagid says, because Lubavitch thinks about the whole world. So the whole world is thinking about Lubavitch. This is a Yid who's a Talmud of a Yid that if he had his way would put us in Chedem. So the Hesped Tutzach, this is it's an amazing, we're living in special times. I was just on the way here, before I left my house, I was watching Rabbi Reuven Wolf spoke at the Kinos HaShluchim. Reuven Wolf from Los Angeles, jeden Tag Streimel. And he spoke about Mashiach, with the Gewaldige Sturm. And one of the points here, I just watched this now 10 minutes ago. I was waiting for my taxi to arrive. Yeah. What did he say? That the Rebbe said that the avoid of our generation, the Mesidas Nefesh of our generation, is al yevish mipnei amaligim, not to care what anybody thinks. Scoffers, al yevish mipnei amaligim. He says, being a shliach today, everyone's going to make fun of you. The whole world recognizes how incredible Lubavitch is, the Mesidas Nefesh, and what they provide, and so on and so forth. The only thing that's a bit embarrassing is to talk about Mashiach, get into trouble. So the Rebbe says, Das Alein is the Raya. This itself is the proof that this is the Avodah for nowadays. Anyway, I don't want to spend the hour talking about Rubashkin, although if I start, I can't stop. I want to say, this is my official speech, okay? I think the biggest miracle in the last 3 weeks we're all missing. The biggest miracle is that there's no intifada. You see a nes goloi with your eyes. Trump announces that Yerushalayim is the capital of Eretz Yisrael. And I'm not Altif Tchuben Divim, it's not my middle name. I understand that it's stuck in the Poshet. The ambassador of Eretz Yisrael to the United Nations made a speech. And I'm sure you've seen that speech. And everybody is focused on the words where he says that the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that the United Nations is a house of lies, a house of darkness. If you would listen for 2 more seconds, for 10 more seconds, for 1 minute more, you hear something much more important. He says, his taka starts off by saying that the Rebbe said that the United Nations is a house of lies, and a house of darkness, I'm going to shine a light. But he says something else. You can't change the Bible. The Rebbe said 40 years ago that there will never be peace in Eretz Yisrael until Eretz Yisrael says that their claim to the Holy Land is from the Eibishter, not from the United Nations. And the Rebbe said this 1,000,000 times. The idea, what right do Yidden have to Eretz Yisrael? There's only one answer. Yidden have right to Eretz Yisrael because the Eibishter gave it to Avraham Avinu almost 4,000 years ago. Matan Torah is 3,300 years ago. Bris Ben Absadim is 430 years before that. You're dealing with 3,800 years. 3,800 years, maybe a little bit more. At the Eibishter said to Avraham Avinu, L'zarach ha-nasati es ha'aretz hazos. We had a Fabrengen in yeshiva last night, And I said to the Bach, this is pretty shalmikra, chumash. These, I have no new material. Like I said, I used to rely on other people's forgetfulness. Now I rely on my forgetfulness. Yeah. Hashem says to Avraham Avinu, the Eibush says to Avraham Avinu, what's called Birchas Hazera, the blessing for children, for the seed. And he tells him, in 4,000 years from today, there's going to be a boy walking on a street, in a land, on a continent, on this planet, who's going to say, I am a child of Avraham Avinu. Now, what is the likelihood of that happening? Mit 4,000 Jahr zurück, someone should say, Avraham Avinu, who's a Echad Haya Avraham, you should know that in 4,000 years from today, there's going to be a person who's going to say, I am a descendant of Avraham Avinu. I read Tanakh, I don't know how, but there's an organization that sends out daily shiurim, and now I got 7 of them. I do 3 different Nevi'im, and 3 different Mishnahs, and a halach every day, and it takes my time, but it's delicious. So one of the Nevi'im that I'm learning for the first time in my life is Daniel. I never read Daniel. Daniel's written in Aramaic, it's very difficult to read. They have a commentary. The problem with the commentary is that I don't know if I trust it, but it's still better than me reading that Aramaic. It's not the same Aramaic in the Gemara. Nebuchadnezzar conquered the world. This is the story. And he became obsessed with immortality. I mean, nobody is foolish enough to think that today. But Nebuchadnezzar became obsessed with the idea that the world that he conquered should remain the same world forever. He understood that he's going to die. Verstanden, as geht sterben. But he has children, he has an heir, and his heir has an heir. And his whole idea was, how can I become so powerful, so strong, that forever Babylon will rule the world? Which, of course, is impossible. You can barely control what happens during the couple of years you're on this planet. To I don't know what word I'm looking for. To organize, to arrange during your physical lifetime. And he has this obsession with this longevity, with the idea that his kingdom should last forever. It makes him crazy. And on the base of this obsession is a lot of crazy things. There's violent things, there's extreme things. In other words, it's not enough that he conquered the whole world. He has to conquer the whole world in such a way that the world should remain conquered forever. You can't do that. Then he has a dream where the Eibishter lets him know that it's not happening. It ain't gonna happen. And the way the dream works is he sees a model, a statue. Part of it is gold, and part of it is silver, and part of it is copper, and part of it is iron, and part of it is earthenware, cheres. And it represents different kingdoms. His is gold. And the Navi is showing him that the head is gold, the Reisha, the Dahava, the head is gold, which is him. But after him there's going to be another. And the way the Nevuah ends is that this missile, this projectile comes, smashes into this gigantic statue, and the whole thing crumbles into dust. So the Nebuchadnezzar builds a statue from head to toe in gold. Farvas, because in the Nevuah, he's gold. So he's going to get every single human being on planet Earth to bow down to the statue of gold till the feet. So he's going to be smarter than the Mibishter. And of course, you understand how that all works. And this is the story with Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel has to explain to Nebuchadnezzar gently. And Nebuchadnezzar takes it from him. That's the interesting thing. It ain't so, man. Nobody can conquer the world and own the world. Yeah? Lahavdil, the Eibishter says to Avraham Avinu, 1,500 years, 2,000 years before Nebuchadnezzar, a long time before, not 2,000 years before, 1,500 years before, that in 4,000 years from today, there's going to be a human being walking around and saying, I am a descendant of Avraham Avinu. Yeah, you show me, how many people do you know who are descendants of Nebuchadnezzar? I don't know if you remember. Saddam Hussein used to announce that he's a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah? But he's a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. Why? Because if you can disagree with him, he'll kill you. So he was a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. he did genetic studies. Nobody even knows Nebuchadnezzar is buried. There's nothing. Garnish geblieben. And maybe there's some trace of his great kingdom. Garnish geblieben. Yeah. And Avraham Avinu believes him. The Eibishter says to Avraham Avinu, in 4,000 years from today, there's going to be people walking around and saying, I am a descendant of Avraham Avinu, and Avraham believes him. Which is amazing. Right? The nature of the world is that it changes. Right? The world moves on. There's one generation, one generation, second generation. And things change. The world evolves. The only thing that never evolves is a Jew. I mentioned to the boys that when Menachem Begin, all of us, visited the Rebbe in Lamed Zayin in 1977 on his way to Washington, so he said, I came to speak to the Rebbe on my way to Washington for the talks about peace. He says, I'm not going to call them faithful. I'm going to call them important. Because in the Jewish people, nothing is faithful. Because we are an eternal people. Menachem Begin says that. Faithful means that our whole future depends on it. Like Begin, I am not going to say faithful. Because by a Jew, nothing is faithful because we're an eternal people. And it's only because of the Abraham, we're better than anybody else. There's nothing like the Jews. And it's because the Eibishter chose us. So we're not better. We're really not better. And verkehrt, we have a responsibility to be better. And he believes it. Right? The Lashon HaPasuk is Vehemen B'Hashem. Etem Gegloibt, he believes him. It's considered a righteousness in the part of Avraham Avinu. And then the Eibishter tells him something else. Birchas Ha'oretz. And then he wants proof. Birchas Ha'oretz. He promises him that this shtickle land, this piece of desert, which was not desert in 4,000 years ago, which is very fertile. This piece of land is going to be your children's land. In 4,000 years from today, it's going to be called the Holy Land, the land of the Jewish people. So Avraham Avinu tells the Meibishter, here he asks for proof. He doesn't ask for proof. The Meibishter makes for Bris Ben Absada. Bris Ben Absada was made over Eretz Yisrael, not over Birchas Hazer, over Birchas Ha'oretz. Why? Because it's unbelievable. That there should be a nation that should identify with us 4,000 years ago. The truth of the matter is, doesn't make any sense either. But McKenna's dead head. The human mind, Avraham Avinu was such a big chacham, but they can't dead head that in 4,000 years we're going to say, be'emes, not politically. I am a son of Avraham Avinu, a biological son or a spiritual son. By Gedei Tzedek, they're called Ben Avraham and Bnei Sarah, but in a real way. And not that I'm a son of Avraham Avinu so I can do what I want. I'm a son of Avraham Avinu so I have to live by the values and the inspiration of Avraham Avinu. But when you say to them, this shtickle land, this piece of earth, this piece of real estate, it's an amazing thing. And the Rebbe said that if you didn't want to have peace, that's what the Rebbe said. If you want peace, you cannot speak about the United Nations because it's a Maisa Amasaf. You can't win that fight. Impossible. The only way you can stop the tzadis is that you come out and you say, God gave it to us. And you know God gave it to us. Because the Bible, our Bible, you read. You call it your Bible. The Christians consider it their Bible. And the Muslims consider it their Bible. So he gets up in United Nations. I'm really not impressed that he repeated what Bibi Netanyahu said 2 years ago. At the Rebbe Tam Gizok, Medrai Sikyar Tzaddik, the Rebbe told him 30-something years ago that the United Nations is a house of darkness, the house of lies. Okay, but when he says, I don't know if this was ever said by any Israeli politician, an official representative of the state of Eretz Yisrael, of Eretz Yisrael, forget the state, yeah? No state, that you can't change the Bible. You cannot change what it says in the Torah, it says in the Torah, it says in the Tanakh. The Eibishter gave us this land. So he makes this announcement, Trump, the ganze Welt wird meshuggah, as we all see. And they called for an intifada. I can't, to me this is the Ness. All the other miracles pale in comparison to this. And again, maybe I'm wrong. What do I know? I'm so ignorant. And by the way, I love my ignorance. It's a wonderful world that I live in. To me, this is Pashat. You say what it says in the Torah, when the ganze Welt wird eingestellt. You say, the Rebbe said it from the beginning. Don't speak to a goy on the goy. You're not a diplomat. You're not a politician. You're not a geoengineer. Eretz Yisrael is not about geopolitics. It's not about the same rules that govern the whole earth don't govern Eretz Yisrael. The whole earth is governed by borders and by laws and by treaties and by compromises. Eretz Yisrael was given to us by the Eibishter, and everybody knows. And the Rebbe used to say it with such hisrachshus, right? Nachlas Elam, Me'elekei Elam, La'am Elam. An eternal inheritance from the eternal God to the eternal people. Now, when the Rebbe said it at a Fabrengen, it made so much sense to us, right? It made so much sense to us, yeah? And the Rebbe says, you're making a mistake. Say it to the Goy. The Goy understands. Whether he understands because it makes sense in his mind, or he understands because when it comes to Yiddishkeit, Goy has free will. Just like a Yid has free will. But just like a Yid's free will extends only to the Tayyag mitzvahs, a Yid doesn't have free will if he's going to buy a red car or a blue car. This is predetermined. A Yid doesn't have free will if he's going to buy such a model or such a model. A Yid has free will only when it comes to Torah mitzvahs. And a Goy has free will when it comes to his Torah mitzvahs. But a Goy doesn't have free will when it comes to a Yid's Torah mitzvahs. So in other words, a Goy has free will when it comes to the Shavah mitzvahs Neneach. What's the Gay Yidden? That's what the Rebbe said. So that you have to say, Bepem Moli, the Eibishter gave it to him. And it's a big nisayon. It was such a big nisayon that for 40 years, an Etzisolic leader couldn't utter these words in public. It's so embarrassing. It's so not diplomatic. It's not how political leaders, geopoliticians don't refer to the Bible. The Bible is a Shena Maisef, a Bobis, you understand, for little kids. Geopoliticians are they're in the real world. And they have the real criterion for life that has to do with ownership and borders and peace and defense and offense and business. I tell it to my students, it's really true. I heard this from people. The most godless city in America is Washington, D.C. And when they run for political office, they're all carrying the God flag. The Eibish came batrev. In other words, they go to pray, whatever you need to do. But when it comes to running the world metanemes, the way the world is governed is deals, it's business. And the Rebbe says, Yidden cannot win deals, business. If a Yid wants to have a peaceful night in Eretz Yisrael, he has to say, the Eibush gave it to me. So this is my personal observation, and I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but here I am talking about it, that Yutas Kislev, Trump announced that he is making Yisrael the capital, Yerushalayim the capital of Yisrael. The whole world is rebelling against it. The Arabs called for an intifada. I want you to know that in the last 2.5 weeks, I got 2 different clips, video clips, of Arab commentators saying in Al Jazeera, you cannot deny the Jewish claim to Israel. In the last couple of weeks. And the commentator was so shocked. This lady, this Arab woman is so shocked. She says to him, you mean Palestinians should stop asking for the right to live in Israel? He says, I didn't say that. But you can't say Jews don't have a right. They've been there for 4,000 years. This is such a change, as far as I know. Again, I live in a little tiny little bubble. But the whole idea was the Arabs said that Yidden were never here. This is the Tanya. And the whole United Nations is the Maskevez. They signed, sealed, and delivered. The Jews have no historic claim to Israel. And the president comes along, makes a statement. I don't even know if he asked us if we're interested in it or we're not interested in it. It's in our best interest. It's not a best interest. It's very complicated. And this is, to me, this is the big moifis. And from the Gula Amitis Vashlema, we can talk about Rabashkin also if you want. But let's see if we can learn some Tanya. Yeah, I already exhausted so much of my time. I'm a come Lenin epis.
Thank you.
No, the Eibush Nafish, be begolui. Should be begolui, be begolui. Say Zach na begolui. Yid has to be proud. Yid has to be proud. Yid has to be proud. Our children have to be proud of what we are. Because what we are is better. It's better. It's better. And we have to teach it to the whole world. It's not our own. I went on Thursday, I went on this rampage in Besivkin. And I sent it around. I sent it around on Friday. If anybody's in my WhatsApp group, you got it. I said things that I think are MS. Okay, let's learn some Tanya, yeah? Enough,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Now, Rabbi say, we're holding at the very bottom of page Vov, page Zayin. Right? Remember the last line, the 2 dots. And Pedagil, yeah? And we had already 3 classes on this. We spoke about the word koiches. We spent time talking about the word koiches. I spoke also a lot about the idea of nishtal shalu mehem, that concept of nishtal shalu mehem, that everything that we have is in the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so on. I spoke about a lot of these points. And I also discussed, amongst other things, the idea, this is how I'm presenting it, this is how I'm teaching it to you, that the neshama has 3 levels. The way I'm presenting this to you, the way I'm teaching this to you, is that the neshama has 3 levels. The highest level of the neshama is the way the neshama is connected to the Eibishter. The way the neshama is connected to the Eibishter is in chapter 2, is in Perek Beis, the previous chapter. That the neshama is a chelik elekami mal mamish, and the neshama comes from chokhmah. The lowest level of the neshama is that the neshama is connected to the world beyond the person. The neshama is connected to what's outside of the person, beyond the person. In other words, involved with other people and other things and so on. And in between, there is the person himself. The neshama's connection to higher is the pnimius neshama, the highest level of the neshama. The The neshama's connection to lower is called levushim, that we learn in the next page, chapter 4, page Dalet, is outside. And then there's the neshama itself. So if you have one part of the neshama which is pulling you higher, another part of the neshama which is involved in lower, so the neshama which is in between has to have a little bit of both. It makes sense. The neshama, the middle part of the neshama, which is the identity by which we know ourselves, has to have a little bit that makes it closer to the way the neshama is connected to the Eibishter, and a little bit that makes it closer to the neshama that has a relationship with the world. So in this Pedic, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it explicitly, but he says it implicitly. It's called Seichel and Midas. The human being is designed to have a mind and a heart. And again, we talked about all of these ideas. I explained to you a Seichel and Midas. Seichel and Midas. The neshama is infinite. The neshama is in infinity. And if the neshama is in infinity, even if the neshama is infinity in the best way, there's no room in one world for two infinites. If you spoke the language of your neshama, and you spoke the language of your neshama, either you would speak exactly the same thing, which is then you would be one neshama, or you'd burn each other up. So we don't speak the language of the neshama. Nobody comes to you and says, I want to do this here and now. Why? I want. I want doesn't work in Elamad. You have to give a reason. The reason that you give is a logical explanation for why you want, when in truth the real reason you want is because your neshama wants. But your neshama wants in an infinite way. The infinite neshama in the finite world is going to burn it up. So the only way we make the neshama work in this world is what we call in our culture through tzimtzum. The neshama's involvement in the world is through a constraint, through a box, through a limitation. Like when you want to speak what your neshama is, or what your neshama wants, or what your neshama does, it speaks it in a measured way. That's what the word midah means. Midah, in a measured way. I explain what I want. I have a sense of control over the feelings that I have and so on. This is the person. The mind and the heart. The mind is closer to the ruchnius of the person. And the heart is closer to the gashmis of the person. In other words, in Pedic Gimel, we're talking about what's called koiches hanefesh, the tools of the neshama. The tools of the neshama serve the purpose of revealing the neshama to the world. They serve the purpose of bringing the world to the neshama. And they serve the purpose of fulfilling the purpose which the neshama was created. So the higher part of the neshama, which is the seichel, is closer to the yetzam hanefesh, to the idea of connecting to the Eibishter. The lower part of the neshama, which is the midas shebenefesh, are closer to doing things in the real world. Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, chapter 16, Perek Tes Zayin, that when you know something in your mind, it's so spiritual, it has little to do with the world. But when you feel something in your heart, that has a lot to do with the world. As Alter Rebbe says explicitly in chapter 16, you can look inside and you can see it for yourself. When your mind knows something to be true, in as much as your mind knows it, it's not connected to the real world. Or to say it in practical terms, people don't live their lives practically by what they understand in their brain. But when you know something in your heart, when you're emotionally involved, or emotionally excited, or emotionally aroused, or emotionally moved by a particular idea, what you feel in your heart. Alter Rebbe says that the heart is one of the limbs of the body. It's just the pnimius of them. So what you feel in your heart is the basis for how you live your life. In other words, this is really what I wanted to say. The mind and the heart are very different. They're very, very different. And in many ways, they're opposites. And what makes us human is that we have a combination of a mind and a heart. If we had only a brain, we'd be a machine. If we had only a heart, forgive me for saying it, we'd be an animal. I'm not sure which is worse, a machine or an animal. But it wouldn't be human beings. What makes us a human being is that you have a mind and a heart. And they're opposites. In every way, the brain and the heart are opposites. In every way, the brain and the heart are opposites. To use the Lashon Chassidus, there's two expressions. The first expression is the language of the mind. And the second expression is the language of the heart. In other words, the brain and the heart are both saying the same thing, but they're saying it very differently based on the difference between the brain and the heart. The brain says, Kirvas Alakim Toiv. Kirvas Alakim Toiv means being close to the Eibishter is a good thing. What does the heart say? Huh? Anybody happen to know? Kirvas Alakim Li Toiv. Bani Kirvas Alakim Li Toiv. Closeness to the Eibishter is good for me. And that's really all you have to know about the difference in the brain and the heart. the brain relates to things as a brain. And the world of the brain is the world of emes and sheker. Is it true or false? What they call in the culture objectivity. Is it objectively so? That's what the brain is arguing. The brain's whole paradigm, the brain's whole world is to tell you what the truth is. So what's the upside of the brain? What's the mile of the brain? The mile of the brain is that because the brain is cold, and because the brain is a little bit further removed from the ego and the selfishness of the person, the brain is able to look at a particular situation and see it for what it is. The brain is able to be objective, to separate itself from its own interest, its own ego, and look at something in an objective way. The brain can know the truth. Even if it's not good for me, the brain can sometimes understand that something is true or something is false, and personally, it's not good for them, but because the brain has this capacity to separate itself, it's able to do this. Now, it's nitazei poshet. Right? You'll see in Tanya chapter 6, we're going to learn this in Mitzvah Hashem Perik Vav. I want to give you a stamazei, a maise, nit stamazei. This is a meinedik maise. There was a yid that geheißen Reb Shapsi Koyen. You've heard of Shapsi Koyen? Shapsi Koyen is the Shach, and Shulchan Aruch. The Sifsei Koyen. He had a terrible life. I think he passed away at 41. He lived through the Gzeirus Tachvatat. He's, if you're young enough to have read the Marcus Lehman books, he's the adopted prince's father. That's the Bas Hasha. He had a very, very difficult life. He lost his wife, and he kept losing his Rabbonos. Aber ich bin der Schach, verstehst was er hier das gewesen? A kid said, so the story, I heard this from Rabbi Lipsky, heard it from Yisrael Jacobs, Shalom, who Mistam heard in Lubavitch. The mice is moidendik. That the Shach was constantly moving around. Remember, you're talking in an age where there's no pictures. Now there's no picture, there's no telephone, there's no telegraph, there's no communication, except what you can physically carry, you know, what they call in America the Pony Express. That's how fast things move. And people didn't know who he was. The Shach would go up in a town and live there for 10 years and nobody will know this is the Shach. So he comes to a town and he went into business and he immediately got into trouble. Financial issues, situations. There was a conflict. I don't know what the conflict was about. I don't know with whom the conflict was, but this I can tell you. The Bar Plukta of the Shach was no Shach. And the Rav that they went to for the Dintera was also no Shach. So the two of them shown by the Rav. They're arguing about who owes who money. I don't know the details. It's not important. And each one is claiming that the other one is guilty of this and this in financial matters. And the Rav hears him out. And the Rav paskins against the Shach. So the Shach starts to run circles around this Rav. He was so dizzy, he didn't know which way to fall. You understand? When you're spinning fast enough, you can't even fall down. I mean, he's a match for the Shach. The Shach, one of the greatest who ever lived, Nitztam. And the Shach is showing him with 101 rayas, as I weiß was read, and he paskin wrong, and it's made a gal upon him, anyway, the Rav hears him out, and the Rav right away realizes that whoever this guy is, and I never met him before, I'm no match for him. So the Rav turns to this younger man. He passed away at 41, you understand? He was never old. And says, I don't know who you are, and I clearly cannot debate with you. He said, but I'll tell you from where I took a psak. There's a new sefer from a young mechaber, and his name is Reb Shapsi Koyen. And he wrote a sefer called Sifsei Koyen, on Chesha Mishpat. And in his sefer, on Chesha Mishpat, and this simon, and this Hagoy, he paskins like I paskin. So, you know what I'm saying? It was a Shach so psakt in. Als je komt te zijn keshen, du weißt doch, was heißt in der Yem, weißt doch, der Rabbi Marash hat gesagt, that a woman, what does a woman know about Lomdus? If it's Negeya Ian, she gets the swaras and Tanoim and Amiroi. Hat so the Shach Achab getan, that he himself paskined in his own Sefer of Halachas, exactly the opposite of what he was paskining when he was touching, you know, Mirer Yeshiva, you understand? It's come to the Egen Akesh and the Mitamod, get was a Chazei Adrei. So the idea that the brain could be objective is tricky. It's only possible for the brain to be objective if it comes before the mind, the heart. If you already have Sheva Midas Reis, and then you come to Sechal Amilid, first you decide how you feel. And then you are going to say that you're going to use your intellect, your objective mind, to explain it. That's like shooting an arrow and then drawing a circle around it. So every time you shoot an arrow, you hit a bullseye. That's not it's not real. But there is a possibility for a human being to use his mind, which is separated from his heart, to know emes. The heart is not designed to know emes. The heart is not supposed to be objective. The heart's not supposed to be open-minded. The heart is supposed to see how it relates to me. And the Eibusha gave us a brain and a heart. The Eibusha gave us a brain so we should know the emes, and the Eibusha gave us a heart so we should care about the emes. The emes is eine geya. The truth should matter. There's the old story. It says in the books, this is what you're supposed to do. And I know it says in the books. The famous story the Rebbe always told about Aristotle. That the Rebbe said it many times by Fabrengen, I believe. And people are wondering, there is some kind of a historic basis for this in a slightly varied form. That the Aristotle taught his Talmidim something in morality. Aristotle was a philosopher, but he touched all areas of philosophy. And he taught them morality, how human beings are supposed to behave. And it was philosophy, which means it was based on principles and axioms and deep logic. It wasn't, don't do this, because if you do this, you're going to be a pig. That's too simple, yeah? This is what a person is. And this is what a person was designed to be. And this is what a person is supposed to maximize himself. So b'meile, so you have to understand the whole philosophy to understand that you shouldn't be a pig. So they didn't understand they didn't understand exactly what he said. So they came to his hut to clarify some of the finer points of his lecture, and they caught him in that very act. A das vaserat gesagt was only done. If he would have said, don't do this, you'll be a pig, Mastami wouldn't have done it. But because there was a whole philosophy, I got to love this. So they say to him, we wouldn't even do this. And we don't even understand your lecture. You're the professor. You're the master. You're the philosopher. And how could you be doing the very same thing you said that you're not supposed to do, because it's not logical, it's not within the philosophical paradigm of what a human being was designed to do. So he answered very plainly, now I'm not Aristotle. I think I heard this myself from the Rebbe. I'm not sure anymore whether I heard things or I think I heard things. But I recollect the Rebbe saying, now I'm not Aristotle. Now, what's the pshat in the Maise? The pshat in the Maise is Aristotle was a brain, not a person. The brain understood right from wrong. The person, was a pig. So the whole point of the Sefer Tanya Kadisha is to say that that's not what a human being is. A human being is the interface between mind and heart. That's what the cold, objective mind analyzes in the finest, with the finest brushes and the most nuanced form of analysis and detail and so on and so forth. It teaches the heart. And the heart is excited by what the mind teaches. Although the heart cannot understand what the mind understands, the heart follows the mind. And the objective mind comes to conclusion intellectually in a particular way. And then it teaches it to the heart. The heart gets excited by it. And because the heart is excited by it, you do what your mind says. You don't do what your mind says because your brain told you. That's just not real. It's false. The idea that you can use your brain to govern your life is nitemis. Why? Because Yetzer Lev ha'odam Raman Yura. We all have a Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara is a Baltaivet. And the Yetzer Hara is a Shakrin. And the Yetzer Hara is a Gazlan. The Yetzer Hara is a Yetzer Hara. And the idea that I'm going to be such an intellectual that because I understand things, if a person is going to be a human being as a human being is supposed to be, it's only because he curbs his heart. And you curb your heart when the ideas that you understand in your brain, you teach your heart. That it's not cold and intellectual. You get excited by the definition of correct and incorrect, moral and immoral, just and unjust, right and wrong. And this is what the Eibishter made us to be. So we have a part of us that's able to know the truth in a cold, disconnected way. There's a part of us that cannot know the truth, but whatever it knows and experiences in a very vibrant, in a very fiery, in a very passionate way. And that's what affects our actions. We do what we feel, not what we think, not what we understand. I know this doesn't sound modern, but it happens to be the truth. That the smartest guy on earth has a Yetzer Hara. And all the Chochmah in the world is not going to curb the Yetzer Hara. Not at all. Forget. The Chochmah makes you smug. The Chochmah makes you self-assured. Zicher mit sich allein. And then sometimes the smartest people in the world can turn out to be the most immoral, the most evil even. If a person's brain is going to teach him what the truth is, and he's going to live that way because he's going to spend the time to take what he understands in his mind and inspire it in his heart, because we live by what we feel, not by what we understand. And that's what Pei Gimel is. Pei Gimel discusses this. And I'm going to repeat how I started today's class. Pei Beis, chapter 2, talks about the Neshama, which is completely above reason. It's an infinite thing. Pei Dalet, the next Pei, is going to talk about our relationship with the world. What's called the Chassidus Levushim. Machshava Diberu Maaseh, doing Teira, mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. Pei Gimel is describing a person. So the Pei Gimel has a half that describes how the person is connected to what we talked about in the previous Peidik, Emes. And it has a half which is connected to what's going to be discussed in the next Peidik, which is the world. But there's a bit of a problem, a small little problem. And the problem is that Peidik Gimel doesn't say what I just told you it said. I want Peidik Gimel to say what I just told you it said. Peidik Gimel, which we're going to believe to start next Sunday, talks about Chochma Bina Das. That's it. He mentions Bavla, he mentions the 6 midas as they're swallowed up in his discussion on Chochmah Bina V'Das. But what actually happens in this page is Alter Rebbe devotes the whole next page. This is one of the shortest paragraph in the whole Sefer Tanya, to explaining Chochmah in 2 lines or 2 words. Then Bina gets most of the page, and when he mentions Bina, he talks about the midas as well, but as they're a part of Bina, and then he talks about Das. And I told this to you when I started this, if you want to learn about the 6 midas, you have to look in the Geras HaKedesh. The 15th letter in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe explores Chesed, Yevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hoyd, and Yesod. Why the Alter Rebbe does this way? Because he didn't ask me how we should write the Sefer Tanya Kadisha, and that's very good, very better than good. So we're going to start this. Next week we're going to actually learn from the 2 dots. I'm just explaining to you the design of the Peidik, or to say it more comprehensively, the design of the Neshama. In Peidik Beis, you talk about the Neshama is connected to the Yebishter. In Peidik Dalet, you talk about the Neshama is connected to the world. And in Peidik Gimel, you talk about the Neshama itself. But the Neshama itself has 2 parts. The part which is closer to what he spoke about in Peidik Beis, this is the Mayach, the mind. The mind can understand and know Emes. And then the second idea, which is not so well discussed in our Peidik, but we're going to talk about it. When we're going to learn Peidik Gimel, I'm going to go through everyone. I'm going to tell you what it says in the Geras Kedesh Tezvav. What's Chesed, and what's Gura, and what's Tiferes, and what's Netzach, and what's Hoyd, and what's Yesod. Ablina, that's my plan. Is the part of the Neshama which is closer to what a person is going to do in action, outside of himself. I just want to say one more detail, and then I'm going to stop. Okay? And that is, das Folgende, the following. In the shir that I gave yesterday, I mentioned this to some people, so I'm going to repeat this again. To use a very simple analogy, we have a hand, that's made up of fingers. You can clench your fingers, make them into a fist, and your hand becomes a weapon. It becomes a very, very powerful tool that can be used for constructive purposes, and it can be used for destructive purposes. When you open up your fingers, you can't do much damage with your fingers. I understand that there's people who have trained their bodies to be able to use their fingers like a fist. But I'm sure those people who use their fingers like fists can use their fists even more efficiently. The fingers are designed for what they call in early education fine motor skills. Right? To raise your hand or to take a step is gross motor skills. But to learn how to use a scissor or to put glue, right? This they do with little kids, 2-year-olds, and paste a piece of paper to another piece of paper, and it should have some semblance of normalcy. For a 2-year-old, that's a ganze avoid, and you go to school and a teacher sits there and shows you how to hold the scissors. And wie man darf schneiden, and how you have to kleppen, and how you have to color. The fingers are not meant to be powerful. They're meant to be precise. They're meant to be, the English word is dexterous, that they can manipulate, they can feel, they're very sensitive, So, the Eibishter gave us fingers. Lahavdil, most animals, not all animals, most animals lost their fingers. Their fingers were fused, they were glued together to make a very, very hard surface or a very tough surface so that they could run or they could, whatever the particulars are. We don't have that force of a fist because the Eibishter gave us fingers. But you have the option of closing your fingers and creating a fist. What's the nimshal? Well, the nimshal is a poshet azah. The human being can function in 2 ways. You can express your neshama. You can be what your neshama is in a finger-like way, which means you're very, very precise. Precise means you involve the nuance. You involve the little tiny details, right? People, I remember one of our children had a huge gash, and we got the plastic surgeon, mitnacht, what is it called? Cosmetic surgeon, yeah. Mitnacht, $5,000. An insurance company paid. This is in the days when Blue Cross and Blue Shield actually paid the bills for 20 minutes of work. Mamish, $5,000. The guy's fingers were pencil thin. This is a man. He was a cosmetic surgeon. This is what he did. His fingers were thinner than yours. You know, people's bodies evolve. I'll use a dirty word. It doesn't take generations. If you become a plastic, you'll develop such fine fingers. His ability to manipulate in small spaces I watched him work. His fingers were so fine-tuned. He was a surgeon. But he was a surgeon who dealt with teeny tiny little needles and thread and small gashes in complicated places, and he was able to sew. He had to sew several layers of skin. You understand? This was the plastic, the third layer and the second layer. I don't know what they're called, the dermis and the madreges, so that there shouldn't be a scar. And a beautiful young kala, yeah. But you watch this guy work, and you say to yourself, how can a person? His fingers, I could never do what he did. Why? My fingers are like blunt objects compared to his. His fingers were incredibly sensitized because of the career that he had adopted. Any person gets involved in a certain thing in a very, very short time, their goof will literally adapt to the umnes, to the chush, what they've undertaken. It doesn't take generations. It takes mamish. His fingers were pencil thin. I've never seen a man with such fingers. Because he needed pencil-thin fingers. He didn't need his fingers to play boxing. He needed his fingers to be able to fix teeny tiny little gashes in a human being's face. And he did it marvelous. It was a pleasure to watch him work. He didn't make a single mistake. My daughter's face, you understand. This is what the human fingers are designed to do. A fist is used to break things, or to build things, whatever the case is. And this is one of the simplest illustrations. You want to understand the difference between the mind and the heart. The brain works like fingers. The brain doesn't have a lot of energy. Has a lot of preciseness. It's brekelt vanander. It divides everything up. It rips everything. It shreds everything in the smallest pieces. A real intellectual is never comparing things to one another. Real intellectuals are always discerning the difference between one thing and another. One of the signs that someone is smart or not smart is not smart people are always saying, this is like this, right? And smart people are saying, what's the difference between this and this? It's a fact of life. And the smarter a person is, the more into nafkemine. There wouldn't be two things if they're the same. If there's two different svaras, it's two different inyonim. And if you're a smart guy, truly smart person, your concern is how they're different, not how they're the same. That's how the mind is designed. So as a consequence of this, from a human perspective, from a psychological perspective, it's true, and it says so in Chassidus, the moyach is chlishus. The mind is weak. The mind weakens a person. A person who uses his mind a lot is not usually a giber. It's a whole... In other words, when you become a brain person, your whole goof becomes like that. And your whole world is subtlety, is nuance, it's preciseness, it's edelkeit. On the other hand, the heart is like a fist. The design of the heart is nitzuf another kleibmzach. You know, I like you because of this, and I hate you because of this. I can't decide because of that, and I pity on you because of this. So here comes one big emotion. It's a bissel von das and a bissel von jens. The emotions are not a smorgasbord, you understand? The brain is a smorgasbord. The heart is one feeling. I like you, I don't like you, you're my friend, you're my enemy. The heart operates with a force, which is of course not very sophisticated, it's not very complex. But in the real world, you need the heart to generate. If you're going to live a certain set of values, you're not going to live those values because you can gribbeln, you can analyze subtle nuance difference between one thing and another. You're going to live this life because your heart has fire. Your heart has passion. And the passion is a simple passion. The heart is not designed to be a complicated tool. The mind is designed to be a complicated tool. The heart is designed to be a powerful force that takes you in a particular direction. A healthy person has the finest fingers in his mind and the toughest fist in his heart. It's not a contradiction. They're two different processes. And the way the human being is designed is your mind, your mind discerns, your mind analyzes and dissects, and he comes to a conclusion. He doesn't come to the heart and say, if you want, you can say like this, and if you want, you can say like that, and if you want, you can say a third way, because the heart looks at him like a goylem and says, I know what you're talking about. Tell me what to do. You understand? For this you have Rashi Yeshiva, Anashiyah. What should I do? The mind analyzes and tells it, do this. Only one way. And the heart doesn't come along and say, yeah, but I heard that there's another opinion. The heart says, this is what I should do, this is what I'm going to do. And the heart musters a lot of koyach, and in a very powerful and a raw way, it affects the human being to do what the heart told him. This is what the Eibishter made us to be. So what did we do today? Well, we studied today, we didn't learn anything of the text, but we completed really the class that we had 2 Sundays ago. You have Chochma, Bina, Vadas, and then you have, these are called Oimes, mothers, and Makel Midas, and then you have the Sheva Midas, Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, and so on. Now, I just want to repeat what I said to you, and I want to say it clearly. Chapter 3 talks about the 10 Koiches HaNefesh and the Nefesh HaLekis. In chapter 6, he talks about the 10 Koiches of the Nefesh HaBamis. Now, I don't have Perek Vav, but you do. Right? The Perek Vav starts, there's one opposite the other. That just like there's Esa Keichas, the Nefesh HaLekis, there's Esa Kisrin, the Misabu, there's 10 crowns, whatever that means, of Klipa, of filth, which are Sheva Mides Rois, V'Seichel HaMelida. Alter Rebbe lists all the 10 Keichas, but in the opposite order. He doesn't say you have an objective mind that's directing a passionate heart. He says you have a passionate heart which is created from the mind. Why do you think the Alter Rebbe does this? In our Perek, he makes it very clear. You have Shalosh Haimes, 3 mothers, Chabad, and from the 3 mothers Chabad comes the 7 Midas, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, and so forth. Because this is the difference between the Nefesh HaLekis and the Nefesh HaBamis. In the Nefesh HaLekis, the mind finds emes and brings the emes to the heart. In the Nefesh HaBamis, the behemoth knows what she wants already. Now she has to just figure out how to explain it. So the first thing is Sheva Midas. There's the 7 bad Midas of the Nefesh HaBamis and her interests. In other words, what she wants. She doesn't have to be so bad, but she is self-centered. The reality of her world is herself. And then she comes up with all kinds of philosophy and logic and science to justify its position. So this is really the difference. Nefesh HaBamis is a mensch. Nefesh HaLekis is a mensch. But wer führt wem? Who is leading who? Is the mind leading the heart, or is the heart leading the mind? Okay, we'll breathe, and then we'll talk about Hey Tevis a few minutes.